37 million Americans are living under George Soros' influence. What a shocking figure. And that's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. I want you to listen to this headline from the very excellent Capital Research Center, which digs deep into some of the most pressing issues facing America's culture and politics. And in this recent paper, published March 2022, the title is The 37 Million Americans Under Soros-Funded District Attorneys. We've all heard the horror stories about George Soros-funded district attorneys watering down law and order and criminal justice in America at various spots in America. But did you know how widespread the influence of these DA offices were? 37 million Americans touched, affected, influenced by these Soros-funded district attorneys. Before I get into all that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for your faith-based podcasts, at washingtontimes.com, where you may also sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter containing the commentaries that I write at the Washington Times, which gives you the bullet points to fight the far leftist influences like George Soros funded district attorneys, right? Because if you don't know about these things, how are you going to fight effectively for the state of America? So go to washingtontimes.com, scroll to the newsletter section, click on it, find my newsletter, Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. Click on that. Sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, right to your email box. Also contains my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcast, which you may also get just by going to Bing or Google, typing in Bold and Blunt podcast with Cheryl Chumley, and subscribing at any of the places that pop up. Okay, so let's read from this piece really quickly. The 37 million Americans under Soros-funded district attorneys, March 2nd, 2022, published in Capital Research Center. In total, Soros cash served as the backbone of 24 successful campaigns, ushering in radical candidates whose policies have created a crime wave so massive that even the left-leaning New York Times has acknowledged it. So says Capital Research Center. With just $29 million, I'm reading from this piece, Soros has effectively created 2 systems of law in the country. One America based on hundreds of years of legal tradition and experience. And let me just sidestep from that, not to mention constitutional law. Back to this piece. And a second system of law. Another America where all norms have been thrown away in a bout of reformist fervor. The divide between these 2 Americas is so severe that commentators, both left and right, have remarked that places like Philadelphia and Los Angeles resemble a third world country. Isn't that interesting? Welcome to Sorostan. Sorostan. Or maybe it's Sorostan, however you want to say it. Anyhow, it's a play on George Soros as a city, right? The population of Sorostan, Capital Research Center writes, is over 37 million. Data from the 2020 census show that localities where Soros-funded prosecutors currently hold office are home to roughly 37.6 million Americans, or 11% of the entire population. Wow, that's huge, isn't it? That's huge. Capital Research goes on to write, the unfortunate occupants of Sorostan are also disproportionately members of minority groups, with 15% of the African American population and 16% of the Hispanic population living in Sorostan. This means that Soros and his allies have disproportionately used minority communities as test subjects for their untested criminal justice reforms. Amazing, isn't it? The left always claims to love, honor, and serve the minority communities. But guess what? They don't. Look at Bill Gates when he wants to run a new vaccine test. He heads to Africa, right? Where do I get that claim? Well, let me just sidestep from this topic of George Soros and talk about Bill Gates for a second. There's this report called Accountability of International NGOs, Human Right Violations in Healthcare Provision in Developing Countries, and the Effectiveness of Current Measures. So I'm going to read from this report just a little bit. While NGOs must adhere to the domestic laws of the places within which they work, adherence is dependent upon the strength of enforcement of those laws. Proponents argue that this independence is essential for NGOs, non-governmental organizations, right, to effectively carry out their work. However, a review of healthcare programs funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or Gates Foundation, calls into question current accountability measures of NGOs in the healthcare sector and can shine a light on weaknesses and potential areas of improvement in the current accountability regime for NGOs. I want to just read a couple more sentences because, Bill Gates gets this big fawning pass from those on the left and from those in the media and from many in governments of the world and political offices of the world because he gives away so much of his money. He's a philanthropist. He cares. He loves humanity. He does this all for altruistic reasons. Remember when the COVID vaccines were coming into development and Bill Gates could do no wrong because Bill Gates just drilled down and determined that he was going to give X amount of dollars to vaccine development and so forth. Well, the other side of the coin is he gives X amount of dollars, but in return he gets X, Y, Z, and more, the entire alphabet, in the fiscal windfall that comes back after shots, for instance, are mandated in governments around the world. So he puts in so much money, but he gets back tenfold, 100-fold in return. The Gates Foundation, according to this report, focuses on world health and population and highlights its strategy of accelerating scientific discovery with reducing costs. Since the early 2000s, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations, Gavi, right? You've heard of Gavi, G-A-V-I, Global Health Innovative Technology Fund, and PATH, all heavily funded by the Gates Foundation, have been distributing vaccines and drugs to vulnerable populations in Africa and India. In 2010, the Gates Foundation funded experimental malaria and meningitis vaccine trials across Africa and HPV vaccine programs in India. All of these programs resulted in numerous deaths and injuries, with accounts of forced vaccinations and uninformed consent. Ultimately, these health campaigns, under the guise of saving lives, have relocated large-scale clinical trials of untested or unapproved drugs to developing markets where administering drugs is less regulated and cheaper. Less regulated and cheaper than in America, for instance, where up until the coronavirus experimental vaccines, it took years for pharmaceutical companies to bring to market to put into the arms of citizens on a widespread mass basis outside of experimental. It took years for Big Pharma to produce vaccines that were determined safe and effective by the medical bureaucrats in the federal government. And then COVID came and everything got sped up, and people like Bill Gates were able to exploit the system and use the mandates, for instance, to recover much of the money tenfold of what they put in to developing the vaccines. So again, this report, very interesting. Accountability of international NGOs, that is non-governmental organizations, human rights violations in healthcare provision in developing countries, and the effectiveness of current measures. And I went down this rabbit hole of talking about Bill Gates, because when you're talking about George Soros, Bill Gates isn't far behind in the mind. They're both billionaires, right, who basically want to run the world. They have a vision for how humans should behave and how humans should basically bow down to their own intelligence, to the intelligence of George Soros and the intelligence of Bill Gates, and they will stop at nothing to realize their vision of global dominance of the world's citizens, and that is their passion in life. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in a higher authority. They don't believe that one day they're going to account for their actions to a higher authority, and they certainly do not believe in the concept of individual rights, of God-given rights that makes up the definition of American exceptionalism. So let's go back to George Soros again, right? For a quick instant before I talk about my guest. Why are American voters electing so many soft on crime, law and disorder prosecutors and district attorneys in America? That is the question posed by the National Police Association under a headline of the George Soros war against tough on crime, law and order prosecutors. So, to answer that question, there's only one name you need to know, this author of the National Police Association report wrote: George Soros. The anti-cop villain could have come out of a James Bond movie, and he not only looks the part, he plays the part to utter perfection. It's true, George Soros does look like the picture-perfect casting call of the evil villain. And guess who else does? Klaus Schwab, right? World Economic Forum. What is it with the look of these guys? You look at their eyes and it's just dark. Bill Gates included. Look at his eyes. Look at pictures of his eyes. If you can nail him down, he's so shifty-eyed, right? He goes left, right, up, down, all around. And he rarely looks right into the camera. Joe Biden, another one. Dark eyes, dark, shifty eyes. The eyes don't lie. They call them windows to the soul for a reason. Just saying. No coincidence. Some of these people, you look into their eyes and you wonder, gee, do they even have a soul? Because you look at the eyes and they're so dark, there is no light in them. George Soros, though, more than any other right now, is causing a constitutional crisis in America in terms of degrading, watering, and outright destroying America's system of law and order. And why? Because the chaos that ensues gives government the cause they need to bring big government into the picture. If there's chaos in the street, the people demand somebody to come and calm that chaos, and who can oh so easily step into those footsteps but government. And this is where leftists grow their footprint. This is where leftists grow their boot-stomping boot print by creating chaos and then swooping in, swarming in, and pretending to be the savior of that chaos. It's all part of their grand design. And guess what? George Soros has been playing this game for a very long time. My guest today has written a book about it, The Soros Agenda, because there is an agenda at play. It's not by happenstance that 37 million Americans are suffering under the influences of Soros-funded district attorneys who want to turn blind eyes to doing their job, which is to prosecute criminals, to uphold law and order. Rachel Ehrenfeld, I want to welcome you to Bold and Blunt. Thank you so much for your time. It is great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Let us talk about George Soros, because you have this book out, The Soros Agenda, which couldn't be timelier given what's taking place across America right now with all the leftist DAs. But tell me from your research a little bit of background about George Soros.
Well, George Soros is 92 and a half. He was born in Budapest, Hungary. He emigrated to the United States and made a lot of money. He made a lot of money in 1992, when he really became very rich, a player, and very well known as a maverick, because he was able to devaluate the British currency, the pound, and he made between $2 to $10 billion. But it's unclear because everything that has anything to do with money when it comes to Soros is not transparent. And his organization, his charity, political philanthropist organization, the Open Society Foundations, has been ranked as the most opaque organization of its kind, not only in the United States, but also from other big think tanks around the world.
Interesting.
So, that's his background. He was born into Jewish parents, into the Jewish religion, although he didn't grow up as an observant at all. His family was completely secular, and he even said that he's quoted to say that his mother was anti-Semite. He does not. He claims he's agnostic. He doesn't like the Jewish state of Israel. He doesn't like Zionism. He's against it, actually. And he has been funding radical left organizations, not only in the United States, but also in Israel, where you can see how they are demonstrated against legal reforms that the Bibi Netanyahu's government, which was elected with a large majority, has promised in the election. And why they don't want legal reform? Because, like here, the left leadership in this country claims that we will lose democracy if the Republicans are elected. They cannot say, well, we want our privileges. We want our privileges. Instead, they say here and there that, okay, we are fighting for democracy. And that's exactly the opposite of what they are doing.
So I want to go back to what you said a minute ago about how he achieved international acclaim when he devalued the pound. And colloquially, that's known as when George Soros broke the Bank of England. In your research, did he do that on purpose, or were there other motivations? What was his reason for doing that?
Well, he did that. This was before the euro came about. And it was, as far as I can tell from my research, he didn't do it on his own. He had a lot of help with that. The decision the decision had to be either devaluate the Deutsche Mark or the British pound. So the British pound was chosen by all kind of central bank with the help of central bankers, especially German bankers and politicians, and he had a wonderful team, and it was expected that something will happen with the pound, and he actually was the one who did that. What he did, he went ahead after this happened, and the newspapers wrote about it because this was a very important event. But he made sure that he will be interviewed by major newspapers, and so that he will be known as the man who broke the Bank of England. He actually had quite a few friends among reporters, and that's how he became famous. It's not only the act that he did. It's not only the devaluation of the pound. It's also what he did. He was smart enough in order to market himself as this financial genius.
So what motivates him at root? Is it love of money? Is it love of power and control? Is it just simply love of self? Because, as you said, he doesn't have any belief in a higher creator.
Well, he thinks that he's a catch meow, as we say. He's a megalomaniac. He said that on several occasions that when he was young, he thought of himself as God. And so he gave interviews and he said, well, now that he has all this money, he can actually act out his fantasies. So unfortunately, his fantasies are nightmares to the rest of us. He's doing what he's doing because he can, because nobody stopped him, because he's using Orwellian language and Huxley and others, Huxley's policies on Brave New World, a combination of those, in order to tell us that he wants open society, while he's really doing everything he can in order to create a chaotic society.
Does he himself reference the Brave New World, or is that just your comparison?
It's my comparison.
Okay.
He, of course, says that, everybody who... And what we are hearing from the Democrats is that we are the ones who don't want democracy. We are the ones who want open borders. We are the ones who want inflation, while they are the ones who are doing it, okay? So using this projection or really meaning the opposite of what you are saying, that's what Orwellian language often has done, is what they are doing all the time.
Exactly. And I think a lot of Americans see that, especially when it comes to the Democrat Party. They say and they accuse of what they themselves do and are guilty. Going back just to your book.
They are doing, speaking of the Democrat Party today, the progressive, the takeover by the progressive, if you want, activists of among the Democrats, many of them have been funded by Soros, and many high officials at the Biden administration, as well as the Obama administration before, have been heavily with Soros organizations one way or the other. Many have been funded, if not directly, indirectly, by them.
Yes, absolutely. So when you look at what George Soros, his agenda is, as the title of your book, The Soros Agenda, suggests, you did in fact look at that and analyze it. What does it mean for America specifically when you look at what Soros ultimately wants to bring about, his vision of the world, his godlike vision of the world? What does that mean for the fate of America?
Not good.
Right.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want capitalism. He thinks that America is the worst enemy of democracy. It is really. It's not. It shouldn't be a superpower. It's a little bit. It's a little bit of a reminder of what Obama said actually on his inauguration speech, and since then, that we are just another country like every other country, and he apologized for America's sins. Soros is not apologizing for America's sins, but he's calling them out, what he thinks are sins, and he wants to change it. He thinks that the Constitution that was written more than 200 years ago, that the founding fathers really didn't know, well, they couldn't foresee the future. So what was good 210 years ago, well, is not good today. Things have changed. They were not pragmatic enough. They were naive enough. They were naive. So he knows that people are changing, and so he has some ideas of how to rewrite the Constitution. That's what he said a few years ago, but now even those are irrelevant because he doesn't recognize sovereignty. So we have open borders. You want to have a global government. Constitution doesn't mean anything. In fact, he really has this idea of that you cannot have governments that will rule the countries. That there will be countries or nations because if there is sovereignty, foreign organizations cannot come and intervene if something doesn't go the way the globalizers think should go. So it's a combination, if you want, of it's not communism, it's not socialism, it's not fascism, but it's a combination of, well, this is the new religion of what he calls an open society, if you want.
Interesting. And I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I have two other questions in mind that I want to ask you. Soros is an elderly guy, but he has kids. Is he grooming his kids to be the identical replacement for himself when he dies?
Sure.
Okay.
He has done it already in 2018. He took his son, his young son Alex, who is his heir, introduced him to all many presidents and prime ministers and all kinds of politicians all over the world as his heir. So, and Alex has been, we saw lately about him, we heard a little bit about him, how he, how many times was he in the White House, etc. But even news like that are misleading because many of the people and the high officials in the Biden administration have been also socially linked to Soros and Alex, etc. So we don't know that he was in the White House 14 times. So does anybody know how many times they met in social events? No.
Right.
That's also not indicator of anything.
Right.
In February 1996, I wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, an op-ed, saying that unchallenged, Soros will be able to change the political landscape of the United States. This was in February 96. I was right. I tried to show, I actually went and showed evidence and tried to convince some Republican leaderships leaders to do something about it, to stop what he was doing, to counter what he was doing. But nobody took me seriously because I didn't have a few $1 billion. So, rich people kind of seem to be holding together for a long time.
I think Americans are suckers for anybody who bills himself or herself as a philanthropist, right? Like Bill Gates got a big pass during the coronavirus. But Rachel, Bill Gates
and Soros work very often together.
Yes, I'm aware of that as well. Rachel, just to wrap up with this last question, because as you yourself just said, you tried warning America years and years ago. You have been proven right. You have this new book, The Soros Agenda. And the final question to you is Is it too late for America to fight this Soros agenda? And if not, what maybe 1, 2, 3 bullet points can you recommend we put in place now?
It is not too late. It's pretty late, but not too late, because I laid down the agenda. I showed the playbook. I showed his strategy in this book. And when people read it, people who care about this issue, will be able to see, to think about ways to counter what he has done. And that will take a lot of doing and quite a lot of money, and more money than actually he has spent. But the Republicans is really, if we want democracy, people who like freedom, individual freedom and capitalism, should do everything possible in order to counter and challenge the policies that he is forcing on us through the Biden administration.
Yeah, the fate of our republic depends on fighting hard. And I hope people pick up a copy of your book, The Soros Agenda, and get some ideas in how to fight back and how to entice or compel their political representatives to fight back as well. Rachel Ehrenfeld, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It was great to have you.
Thank you very much. The book is available on Amazon and on my website, acdemocracy.org.
Excellent. And I'll promote that website and your book again as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, the website, acdemocracy.org, right? American Center for Democracy and Economic Warfare Institute, acdemocracy.org. The Soros Agenda. You may think you know what Soros's agenda is, but I guarantee that you probably don't know all the specifics. It's a book definitely worth reading. I want to thank you for listening and remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, or wherever podcasts are offered. And if you already subscribe to Bold and Blunt, really, thank you so much. I appreciate your support, and so does the Washington Times. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.